I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. Today, I have with me a colleague. I would like to call him new, but he's been at this game for a little while, certainly here at Albany State University, I think a little bit under a year, but he came in, hit the ground running. It seems like he's been here forever. He is none other than our athletic director. He is Mr. Anthony Duckworth, and we affectionately call him or refer to him as Tony. Sir, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Wilson. Thanks for having me today.
Good. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You have a extensive history as it relates to athletics. I know a little bit about it. Share with our viewers what triggered or what sparked that interest in athletics, and then we'll lead all the way up to your current role here at Albany State University.
Very well. Thank you very much. Athletics has been a big part of my life since I was a young child, and really always have liked sporting events. And then when I got into junior high and high school, I started competing and all of the above. And ultimately, that led me to beginning my coaching career in Macon, Georgia, back in 1990. In fact, at a high school there at my alma mater. And through that led to opportunities for me to break into the college ranks. My ultimate goal was to be a head men's college basketball coach. And in 1996, I was able to achieve that goal and was actually the youngest four-year head coach in America at 28 years old there at Belhaven College in Jackson, Mississippi, and had a really good run there for 4 years, had an opportunity to compete in the national tournament. From there, I moved on to Huntington College in Montgomery, Alabama, and was the head men's basketball coach there. But my final 3 of 6 years there, I was also served as the associate director of athletics. And it was during those final 3 years coaching basketball, as well as being an administrator, that I started sensing a shift in my career direction that ultimately landed me my first director of athletics position at Maryville University in St. Louis in 2001, and was there for 4 years prior to transitioning for the last 9 years prior to coming to Albany State, when I was the director of athletics and chief athletics officer at Northeastern State University just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it's kind of been a fast and furious ride. It's been an interesting time here at Albany State. I started on January 2nd, and of course, in mid to late March is when we sent students home and transitioned to online and distant learning, and have been, canceled our fall sports. And so we've been kind of doing that and planning for this fall, the return of not only our student athletes, but our entire university community and our students. But it's been wonderful working with the president and colleagues like yourself on the cabinet as we've been prepping to have a banner fall this year at Albany State.
I gave you some, obviously, I think I said almost close to a year, under a year. And when you said that, the timeline, I think what the reason I added on some time is because you were heavily involved during the interview process and just actively already engaged, which would just speaks to it was destiny. It was fate for you to be here. I'm glad you brought up our current situation. I've just been extremely curious. I know our athletes, as well as a lot of our student leadership, arrived a little bit earlier, and this is actually the week that the remaining students will arrive and get either reacclimated or acclimated to this campus environment. I was curious as it relates to the student athletes, because we are in the world of COVID-19 right now, which has, toppled the world. And so we're trying to now adjust to that. How have you've guided your athletes? How are they adjusting to this? And then how are they still involved in the whole conditioning process and being athletic scholars or scholars, if you will, when that's always at the forefront, but the whole just staying conditioned and active in their particular sport with the need to social distance?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And that's something that we've put a lot of planning into in athletics, and have been able to get a lot of good quality guidance from the Sports Science Institute with the NCAA on how we want to handle that. Because as I mentioned earlier, we suspended our fall sports, or spring sports, I should say, back in March of last year. And so there is a concern about what level of conditioning that our student athletes will return based on, many gyms in their communities were closed down for months at a time. And so you had to get really creative, and our strength coach did some good things in staying in contact with them to help them along that process. But fast forward to the summer, where we started our voluntary summer workout program, and we did have around 25 to 30 student athletes on or around July 6th come back to campus and begin some of that conditioning, getting ready in preparation for the fall. But of course, then shortly after that, the decision was made by Albany State. We accepted the recommendation of our conference, the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, to suspend fall sports. So with that, our football and volleyball and women's soccer and women's volleyball, all of a sudden, rather than them coming back earlier prior to regular students, they were pushed back to when our general students come back. So what we have done is we've put in a plan that is, once they have their physicals on August 10th, we're doing a 20-day transitional period where we're going to let our athletes begin conditioning, but not necessarily at the normal high level, so we can slowly, gradually start getting them reacclimated to this level of activity. And once we get to that 21st day, if everything is going well, during that 20-day period, they'll be doing some small amounts of skill work with the coaching staff in addition to our strength coaches. It'll be 100% social distancing. And then at 21 days, we'll evaluate, can we do more based on the health conditions of our campus, of our student athletes. It's just, there's so many unknowns, but we have a very good plan in place, because the worst thing we could do is overextend our student athletes at the beginning of the semester after them being on a sabbatical, if you will.
Right.
Coupled with, we don't want to contribute, by letting them get back to full-blown athletic activities. We don't want to contribute to any sort of outbreaks on campus. So we're being very conservative in our approach that I think will benefit the student athletes and our campus community. And then it's a fluid situation. So we'll just evaluate how much, if any more than what I just described, that we'll be able to do this semester.
I love that. So you make me think we're in the process. I'm working with student affairs and our student leadership SGA, and we're having discussions and planning for a Mascot Campaign, just to stress the importance of, preventative measures in terms of the exposure and exchange of the virus for those who may be asymptomatic or, even have those symptoms. And so I was thinking about your athletes. We'll have to figure out how we can incorporate them, because what is absolutely mind-boggling is for individuals to say, I cannot wear the mask. But your athlete's example, that you can certainly wear the mask, because they do that while they're going through their conditioning process or their usual ritual, if you will, in terms of their practices and engaging with one another. You still have them to mask up. So I can't imagine, exercising or whatever is entailed in that conditioning process and then having to wear the mask. So those of us who are not avid athletes, if you will, or actively involved in that level of conditioning, we certainly can wear our mask if your athletes are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to Dr. Terry Lindsay and our Student Government Association about potentially being a part of maybe a little social media campaign with our student athletes to really promote that, because when we have student athlete orientation on the 11th, I'm going to really emphasize the importance of them being the leaders that we know they are on their campus. Set the right example, not only help keep our student athletes accountable to masking up, but help encourage and keep our general student body up to speed with all of that as well, because we do want to keep our campus community safe. And you make a good point. There may be times where they won't be wearing a mask during certain activities, particularly at times outside, but anytime they're within that social distancing realm, or they're inside, in our strength and conditioning area, as far as working out with weights, they will be masking up. And so you make a good point. If we can do that when we are doing some high rate activities, certainly all of us can do it when we're in our offices or in the classroom, or quite honestly, I encourage folks to even wear it around campus, even when they're outdoors as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got to flatten this and try to resume some level of normalcy. We have to certainly do our part. So there's always a fun component of these interviews. It certainly is for me, and I hopefully my guests feel the same way. And we want to certainly kind of lighten the mood because we are just inundated in information overload as it relates to COVID-19. So I always ask my guests, and I give them a choice, and didn't give you a chance to kind of think about this, which will make it a little interesting. But if you have an opportunity or had the opportunity to invite three guests to your home for dinner, you will have to, of course, prepare dinner as well. But tell us who those guests would be, and hopefully someone on an international scale or individuals that our viewing audience would be familiar with, and why would you invite them, and what would be the topics of conversation?
Well, first of all, if I'm the one that's in charge of the meal, the one thing that would be a must, assuming that the guests are comfortable with this, I would go with steak on the grill.
Okay.
And maybe have some sides there, other things. But the three, I'm going to stick with the sport theme, being the AD. My childhood hero unequivocally was none other than Julius Dr. J. Irving. He was the original Michael Jordan with the endorsement deals, the high flying acrobatic dunks and high flying play. But beyond that, now as an adult, I look back and I'm so glad he was my hero, because what a gentleman, what a great father, what a great human being, and great ambassador for not only the NBA, but just sports in general. And, and another childhood hero that I had was none other than I'm a big fan of America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, and Roger Staubach, their quarterback when I was young. And you still see him coming to games and be out on the field. And even in his 70s, he throws a pretty good pass. But
Okay.
he was a graduate of the Naval Academy. I believe he won the Heisman Trophy. But again, just an unbelievable human being that has had impact far beyond just the sport that he played. And then, of course, the third person that I would love to have a part of that conversation. Those of you that follow me on Twitter see that every now and then I have interaction with none other than Spencer Tillman. Well, Spencer Tillman was a major big time college running back at Oklahoma back in the day. Now he's a sports broadcaster with Fox Sports. He teams up many times with Tim Brando. But the thing that I'm so impressed about Spencer Tillman is not only what he did as a college and professional athlete, he is one of the brightest individuals on leadership that I have ever encountered. And every now and then he and I will have some comments back and forth on each other's posts, and that just kind of sends chills up my spine. But Spencer Tillman is just an amazing individual. And my guess is that we would obviously talk about sports. We would talk about what's going on with COVID-19 and how that not only impacts society, our world, but the sporting culture that we're in. But I certainly think we would have conversations about the social injustices that we have seen, particularly that have really been highlighted in recent months. And I think the perspectives that these three gentlemen would bring would be amazing, and something that you would hope you could almost videotape it or record it so you could share that conversation with a grander audience. But that would kind of be the three guests and dinner of choice that I would have, Wendy.
Interesting group. Before we wrap up, if I'm not mistaken, and you can tweet this to him next time you have an exchange. I believe Spencer Tillman was here in Albany maybe about 15, close to 18 years ago. And I believe it was at the invitation of a representative at Phoebe. I think he came here for a men's health initiative. That his name, I was like, oh yeah, I remember him. Because I think he's authored a book or two. So certainly an interesting individual, interesting in the good sense, the leadership component, absolutely. And of course, the gentleman's gentleman, Julius Irving. His memoir is absolutely one of my favorites. And so I recommend it to you if you haven't read it, and certainly our viewers. So yes, you will have to figure out a way, with their permission, to film that so the rest of the world can partake in it. I'll have you come back, give us an update, because I know our viewers want to know, as this fluid situation, as you so accurately describe, plays out. Hopefully, we will see an end in sight in the near future, not too distant future. And I know there's some conversations about then having fall sports in the spring. So once you get some updates on that, please know that you are welcome to come back and let us know what we can expect. I know we have huge sports fans out there that want to become engaged again and provide us with the level of wonderful support that they do. But on behalf of the institution, certainly President Mary Ross Fedrick, thank you for all that you've done and continue to do. Again, you had a baptism by fire, as a couple of our other colleagues did when they, quickly arrived here, and then it just changed so drastically. But you have done it as the consummate professional that you are. And so I thank you for that. Know that you're always welcome back on the show. Continue to stay safe. And hey, just give me a call and say, when, listen, I need to come back and update your viewers on a couple things. So thank you for joining me on the show today.
Absolutely, Dr. Wilson. I look forward to that day that we can talk about sports in the spring, and because we're going to be optimistic and say it's going to be a win and not an if. But thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing to work with you at the cabinet level on a daily basis, as well as look forward to be back on the show in the future.
Outstanding. I look forward to it as well. Viewers, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I look forward to seeing you next time.